Welcome back to our Shining the Spotlight series, where we shine our light brightly on incredible initiatives that are working to drive that much needed positive change in STEM. Today, we are joined by the wonderful representative from CS for Success, who is the co founder also, Abril. And we've had the opportunity to collaborate with CS for Success on their Let's Chat mentorship session that we hosted with Jonah Anderson, who is a really great role model in tech. That episode is available on our YouTube channel, so do check that out if you want some inspiration on all things mentorship. But Abril, we would love if you could please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. As Ellie mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders at CS for Success. There's three of us in total. But at CS for Success, we're a small education consultancy focused solely on computer science education, and we serve the K-14 pipeline, so working up into community college. Specifically, we're looking to create a more equitable, accessible, and inclusive landscape for computer science education. We work all across the United States and occasionally internationally in collaborations such as these. And we really are focused on creating a landscape where students are able to pursue not only beginner, but also intermediate and advanced level coursework and opportunities and have hands-on experiences, skills training, and understand the real world applications of their classroom experiences.
That is such an important focus. And what was it that inspired you to get started with this with your other two co-founders?
For me, the work is really personal. I think for all three of us, the work is really personal and we've come to it in different ways. But I consider myself to be one of the students that we're serving. So I was in Chicago when the original Computer Science for All movement got started. I was actually a student in high school when the city was coming together to make computer science education more accessible. And I got involved in the initiative as a student advocate. I kind of was in the right place at the right time in a lot of ways. I mean that in the sense of I was actually able to take computer science classes at a school that was lucky enough to have them, but I was also able to understand how I was lucky to have access to those classes and why it was important that my peers and other schools had access to them as well. So now, as someone older and in my professional career, I stayed involved in that movement. I continue to pursue it as an advocate, but also as a career. And so when I go and I'm working with teachers or administrators or community-based organizations, especially students, I'm able to talk about and relate to them that, oh yeah, I did that program with Google too when I was a student, or I took the class you're taking because I worked to make sure it was in the school that you're in. And I understand why it's so important that we make sure there's access to these classes, because if I didn't have access, I wouldn't be able to have the career I have now. So for me, it was life changing, and I want to make sure that we're able to change the lives of so many other students and open up doors that they just wouldn't have access to otherwise, because it's so important in the future that we are looking at now that's going to be so technologically advanced.
Accessibility is really key here. And of course, it's attached to your own personal story and the stories of your other co-founders. That's really important. For you, what does it mean to create an ecosystem of high quality computer science educational opportunities?
So I think what you'll see if you work anywhere in tech, whether it's in education or it's at a corporate level, if it's in recruiting, if you touch the industry at all, if you're working with kids, if you're working with adults, whatever it may be, resources and programs become available all over the place. They're often very dispersed and segmented, and they don't talk to each other, right? So someone may find out about one thing, but they don't know about another, and they would benefit the most if they knew about both of them. Or we might have a situation where someone's using both resources, but they're duplicative and they're not actually benefiting someone because they're not growing in their skill set, because we've released two sets of resources, but we didn't take the time to look and figure out that we needed to release something that builds on the first resource and isn't a replicate of what it already does. So when we're talking about developing an ecosystem, we're talking about making sure that the stakeholders who are invested in any type of this work in this industry, that they're talking to each other, that they're examining and evaluating what it is that they offer to students, to adults, to teachers, and that they're transparent in their outcomes, so that we can make sure that not only do we share the opportunities that are available to everyone, but that we are effectively working together and that we're removing our egos, and making sure that we have the best intention possible and making opportunities available and accessible for everyone.
So it's that sweet spot of collaboration, communication, transparency, merge all of these together, and it makes the ingredients for an impactful ecosystem. And from your own experience, Abril, what have been some of the most significant barriers that schools face in providing equitable access to CS education?
I've worked in a school system and now I work outside of a school system. So there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that can exist that can prevent schools from being able to provide the programs that they need to. But I think across the world, we are aware of the teacher shortage that currently exists, both in tech and NCS and outside of it. I think COVID exacerbated that, when it kind of heightens the difficulty of being in classrooms, of teaching virtually. And it's definitely making the need for computing based classes even more intense. So I think when we're talking about what's needed to be able to make computing education accessible, a lot of it comes down to having an adequate teaching pool, making sure that there are teachers available, and then making sure that they're trained properly, that they have access to the education that they need, and then making sure that they're compensated fairly. Here, where I live in Chicago and then across the US, we're on strike a lot. Teachers are striking because they're not being compensated, and it's very easy to understand why that's happening, when we're asking them to constantly be doing more work in more ways, learning and adapting so that they can serve their students, and give them the type of education that they need in a safe and inclusive culture and environment. But we're not doing that for them as the teachers. uh, when we're also thinking about it from the perspective of we're asking you specifically as computing based teachers to get these skills that then prepare you to perhaps take a job in an industry that will pay you so much more. Why are you going to stay in the classroom? We're fighting two battles and two different fronts at that point. So a lot of my role is not only thinking about this from working with the stakeholders to help them improve their programs and think about those complex problems, but then to also be talking about the policymakers, to be talking to the people, um, creating the structures that are developing what the program looks like, from a top-down perspective, to try to make sure that we're serving not just our students, but the admins and the teachers and the counselors in an effective way.
Yeah, well, these teachers, they're transforming lives. They're shaping our future generations. It's so important that there is fair pay, there's equitable opportunities for everybody involved. And of course, this is where you come in. You also help with consulting. Could you share an example of something that you've implemented at CS for Success that has worked really well and made an impact, something that you're proud of?
So I'll share one kind of more complex story and one really fun story that we just did. So we're working on a very long project with one of our clients and partners that's focused on computer science for English learners, in the state of Illinois. So we have a fairly high population of English learners in Illinois. So students who are coming in and English isn't their first language. And there's two things happening. We passed a policy in Illinois that made computing education mandatory. There was a new requirement across K-12. There we broke it up into two ways. So computing literacy and computer science. So computing literacy is quite similar to digital literacy, how it was written in that bill. So making sure that students understood how to use a computer effectively and how to be safe online, things like that. And then we also had computer science. When that bill was released, this is kind of how our organization is talking about and thinking about being equitable and inclusive. There was no language to talk about populations like English learners or diverse learners who often are pulled out of a traditional classroom and don't have access to traditional resources, traditional teachers, gen ed teachers, and need additional support. So we work with one of the support centers in the state of Illinois to train bilingual directors, bilingual teachers on how do you actually use computer science to reinforce language development and make sure that those students are not only satisfying that requirement because they have to, because there was no caveat in that bill to say you just can't teach them, but that they're also using computer science, which isn't itself a language. You're learning syntax when you're coding to reinforce their English skills. So we've been working on that for several years, and we've modified several aspects of the project. But you'll find that often those teachers are very excited to see and understand how computers can be such a helpful tool for their students who struggle daily with things like arithmetic because it's so complex, it's hard to break down, but using something that's much more hands-on is a little bit easier for their students to understand. And then a second thing that was quite fun is for Computer Science Education Week in December, we hosted a very large citywide initiative in Chicago where we brought together families, government officials, workforce partners, community-based organizations, people who aren't normally in a room together to talk about computing, learn about it. And I would say it's one of the first times we've been able to really get all of those people together to collaborate, share their resources, their programs, build that ecosystem that we're talking about. And even if it's just for a day, having buy-in from all of those stakeholders shows that it can be done and that we can share resources and get people excited about having this conversation.
Wow, that is really, really fantastic. And again, collaboration is key here. I love that you're intertwining the learning experiences, you're reinforcing that computers are such a helpful tool and resource for learning. And I can imagine working on a project for 2 years, seeing then that impact is just so fulfilling. And you must be incredibly proud, Abril. Accessibility is a bit of a theme here that I'm hearing. It's so important. How else do you feel teachers can create more accessible learning environments?
Well, obviously, we would love to work with you. We are consultants. We have resources available on our website, like tools that are very tangible that you can pull and use, and we do virtual professional development as well as in person, and we're happy to come in and talk with you. But I think it's about finding the right tools, resources, content, curriculum for you. We are very mindful to evaluate who we partner with to make sure that they meet our value system and that they are aligned with our core mission and vision for how we see the future of computer science education. So outside of just working with us, I would suggest looking at who we work with. We know that often funding is an issue in this space. We work with a lot of districts and nonprofits, community-based organizations. So we are doing our best to have a range of pricing options for our partners as well. And I would look at their resources to try to bring new things into your classroom that are inherently leaning towards an equity lens and how they're written and developed.
For sure. So they can utilize that wealth of experience available at CS for Success and that genuine passion, because, of course, it's a very personal mission to all of you involved in what you're doing. And one thing that you're also heavily involved with is events, community, of course. You was at the CS week in December as well. Why is that so important for you?
So we travel quite a bit doing professional development. That's our largest segment of events, and we and attend conferences quite frequently. And then we host workshops and events like the one in December to bring community partners together. For us, because we're consultants, we don't work directly with students. We work with the stakeholders who serve students. So often those kind of one-on-one interactions at events is how we can have the most direct impact on educators, on administrators, on parents, and on students. So it's very important for us to contribute in that way to make sure that we're bringing people together. We see ourselves as kind of the ecosystem organizer. And so we can pull everyone together and make sure that we're collaborating in all of the places where we do have a presence. So it is the way in which we feel we can be the most effective is the collaboration aspect. And so whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, we know that often those types of resources, whether it's forming a relationship, recording a virtual event, they become long lasting and you can have ripple effects. And we want to make sure that we are having that type of effect in the atmosphere.
What upcoming events are you excited about?
We're about to start planning for the next iteration of our large December event. I know it seems very far out, but it's a very large event. We service over 1,000 people, so we're getting excited for that again. And we will be traveling to Orlando in a few weeks. Our sponsorship of a cyber event out there was just announced a couple days ago. So we're excited about that.
That's all very exciting. And honestly, the way time is going, December is going to come around very, very fast. We're speaking about the future of CS education. Now, I want you to get your crystal ball out here, but what do you feel the future actually has in store for computer science education?
What does the future look like? I think the future can look like anything, really. I think right now we're seeing a trend in artificial intelligence and in cybersecurity. I think that's not going away, particularly the artificial intelligence aspect. I think we really need to lean into that and make sure that we are teaching children how to be ethical in the development of artificial intelligence and inclusive. That's a big aspect of it. But I do think we really need to think about what we're integrating into the classroom as it relates to the industry. Those things don't necessarily speak to each other very well until we get into the post-secondary space. So I don't think there's a good way to predict what things will look like because they're changing so quickly. But I think if you look at what's happening in industry, that's the best way to understand what should be happening in the classroom. And we need to do a better job of that. What I will say is that we're very stuck in our ways in education as a whole. There's this idea that this is the way that it's always been done, so this is how it should be done. There's a rigid rule following kind of a mentality. We need to get more comfortable with change and more inspired by the idea of failure. Tech is very much of this fail fast, fail hard, and get back up and keep building. And there's no way that we will be able to develop computing content and curriculum for students that will adequately prepare them for what's happening in the industry until we can be comfortable with iterating as quickly as industry does in the K-12 space. Right now, do I think that's happening? No, because I don't think the policy is changing as quickly as it needs to, which means that it's not trickling down into the classrooms. There's so many layers to it to actually get to the student that by the time they get out of school, it's already changed again. So it's a complex issue to say that what does the future right now looks like. We're still not prepared is what it looks like. I think we need to work on fixing that.
What changes would you like to see in the policies?
We need to focus more on computer science and less on computer literacy or digital literacy. You inherently learn computer literacy when you're learning computer science. I think the idea that you don't learn how to type when you're learning computer science doesn't make sense to me. You don't need to have a requirement solely on computer literacy if you have a requirement on computer science. I do think that we need to make computer literacy an aspect of computer science, but we should focus on computer science. I think there's been a large conversation around making computer science required and not just an offering for all students. We need to do that. We haven't across the world. Some places have, but we need to make sure that students are required to experience this, to learn this. And a one touch is not enough. I think that it would be a shame for students to have one touch and then not have to continue their learning when it's unrealistic to expect that they go out into the world in any profession and wouldn't need to understand how to fully utilize and create with a computer, and the way that our society is developing using technology.
I'm totally on board with making computer science a requirement. It's all about exploring trial and error and just really being able to touch it in many different instances. How can folks support the important work that you're doing at CS for Success?
The easiest way is to find us on our website, so csforsuccess.com. I would suggest signing up for our newsletter. We send things on a quarterly basis with the events that we're having or that we'll be at, as well as resources from our partners and from us that we recommend that you use. You can find us on social as well, but that would be the fastest way to get involved. We're always looking for new partnerships, whether you're a community-based organization, a curriculum provider, a school, or a corporate organization. We're happy to partner, to share resources, learn more about the work that you're doing. And that's how we met you. And we are happy to collaborate. We are always looking to grow the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Well, I will put all of the links in the description box below. And what final reflections would you like to share?
We've seen a lot of changes in policy in the past couple of years, a lot of momentum, specifically within the States that took a long time to get. So I'm definitely inspired by what I've seen, and I've traveled a lot more across the country than I have in the past few years, to be able to talk to people, see what they're doing. I think I'm inspired by the questions that I get asked, the excitement that people have to really kind of make these programs amazing for their students. It really comes down to getting people the resources that they need, removing the bottlenecks, removing the barriers to access. Go back 5 years, the issues were we couldn't get people to sign up to do anything, to be excited about this. It was not that doesn't happen anymore, but we were having different issues. People didn't understand why learning this was important. It wasn't connecting. I think when the world entirely moved to being online because we had to, because we couldn't go anywhere, people immediately kind of put the two and two together of like, computers are going to objectively be important for us. So the shift in mindset started to happen, and their momentum is there, and it's definitely changed how we do our work.
Thank you so much for your time, Abril. It's been so great to shine the spotlight on CS for Success, focusing in on computer science education, and we're excited for this year for you.
Thank you.